This is Defiant's Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor, and this is Wednesday. It is the most important day of the week here at Defiance.org because it is our weekly mission brief. This is where we announce a real action to counter Donald Trump's corruption. Not hand-waving, not talking about the problems, doing something real about it. We do that every single week. That's why we launched this nonprofit organization. That's why we encourage people to join the Club for the Courageous. This is the place where you can fight back every single week against the president's abuses of power. And this week, our announcement of what we're going to do is right up the alley of why we launched this organization. We've got incredible people here with us today to talk about it. We will be talking with nationally renowned lawyer Mark Zaid. We will be talking with independent journalist Don Lemon, and we'll be talking with another renowned lawyer later in the program, Abbe Lowell, who has defended some of the top targets of Donald Trump's revenge campaign. But first, we always start our weekly mission brief with the Defiance win of the week. And I want to bring in my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz, to be with me for this one because, Xander, this is also relevant to something Defiance.org helped fund and promote. This is a big win heading into the midterms, not only because the ruling I'm about to tell you about is a win for democracy, but because Defiance.org members helped to fund this lawsuit and some of the organizations behind it. Okay, enough lead-in. Let me tell you what happened. A federal judge blocked Donald Trump's mail-in voting restrictions nationwide through the November election. Now, this actually builds on a win we talked about earlier this year. Back in April, 23 states successfully sued to block key parts of Trump's executive order. But that protection only applied to the states that brought the case. Yesterday, a federal judge expanded it to all 50 states. That judge underscored that timing had a lot to do with her decision. States are actively preparing for the election, and she stated that the administration's actions were, quote, only increasing chaos and an erosion of trust in our democracy.
It's crazy.
So she
crazy
blocked.
Quote from the judge.
These are federal judges saying this, right? These are not just
activist.
like, blogs or activists or commentators. Xander, she blocked the restrictions nationwide through November 9th, 6 days after Election Day. The judge also found that protecting eligible voters from having their ballots rejected heavily outweighs the Trump administration's interest in enforcing election regulations that it, by the way, has no constitutional authority to impose. In other words, she was not willing to wait for voters to lose their ballots before stepping in. So, heading into November, Donald Trump's mail-in voting restrictions that would have allowed him to have the head of the U.S. Postal Service reach in and grab your ballot and prevent it from being delivered, which sounds as crazy as it is, that is now blocked in all 50 states. And that is our Defiance win of the week. Xander, your reaction to that? How you feeling in light of that?
That might be close to the win of the year. What do you think, Miles? That's a pretty big one, man. It's so nice.
Maybe. We'll see. The Trump administration can still appeal this, Xander, and they probably will. They're probably going to try to do some kind of emergency appeal. But here's the thing. Any judge is going to have to respond to what this federal judge just said, namely that we are so close to the election that this erodes fundamental trust in the democratic process. Would love to see an appeals court say, nah, I'm fine with eroding trust in the democratic process. So this is a big win. I'll specifically give a hat tip to our friends at the Campaign Legal Center. This is one of the organizations that Defiance.org members funded. That was one of the groups at the forefront of this lawsuit. Congratulations to them and to the plaintiffs, to everyone involved. This is why we fight.
Oh, yeah. Miles, heading into this week, man, I'm pretty fired up for you. The thing we're announcing today was almost what Defiance.org was before we kind of expanded the scope and the mission. Are you excited for this week? I'm sure you've got to be.
I am, my friend. I'm excited for this week. I'm excited to talk to our next guest because we did indeed talk about doing something like this as the entire organization. And for those who don't know, is when Xander and I first reconnected after I had been targeted by Donald Trump, He signed an executive order to have me investigated for treason, in his words, and it had a lot of impacts on my life. It upended my life. It blew up the
Mhm.
small business that supported my family. It resulted in death threats, not just against me, but against my wife and my daughter. Everything in our lives changed after that happened last April. And Xander, you and I talked about creating something that we called a legal offense fund
Right.
because we wanted to go crowdsource support for people to stand up when they were attacked. If y'all
Mhm.
remember, I say this all the time. Every single week I say this, and I won't stop saying this. In the first half of last year, a lot of people who were attacked by Donald Trump immediately went to ground, immediately went into a defensive crouch and said, I don't know if I should fight back. This is scary. I'm going up against the federal government. And the experience I had was that when people crowdsourced their support to me, when people
Mhm.
came out of the woodwork and said, I'm with you, it inspired our family to fight back rather than do what a lot of people around us wanted us to do, which was just retreat, hide out,
Mhm.
don't make it worse for yourselves. Don't poke the bear is the word we heard over and over. Well, our constitutional rights were just violated. Of course, we're going to go poke the bear. And thankfully, people around the country encourage us to do that. So, Xander, you and I spoke about how do we make it easier for people who are targets of Trump's revenge to fight back. Now, we decided to go even bigger than that. We wanted to create an
Mhm.
apparatus, defiance.org, to allow anyone to get into this fight and push back against Trump's corruption. But we have not lost sight of that original focus, which is how do we help the targets of Trump's revenge, whether it's a elected politician or an ordinary American who's a protester, fight back when they are pursued by the Trump administration unfairly and in many cases illegally. And today, we are going to talk about that because our mission is what, Xander? Tell the audience what our mission is this week.
Well, we're launching the real anti-weaponization fund, not the one funding Jan Sixers to be bad boys, get out there and cause more mischief. The one that protects targets of Trump's illegal investigations and his weaponization of the DOJ, as we've seen over and over and over again, and ensuring as soon as that happens to some of these targets, they know people have their back. Miles, I mean, can you walk us through that window between you being targeted and not having that collective action surround you? I know pretty rapidly you started getting outreach from people across the country that are saying you should fight this. We've got your back. But in that day when you felt alone, and you saw some of, as you mentioned, your business interests falling apart and some of the people closest to you stepping away. What did that feel like before you got outreach from professionals that could provide legal defense before people from around the country reaching out? And what did that feel like
Yeah.
after? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it felt like it was total isolation. I mean, it was total isolation. Some of the people closest to us in our lives, the best man in my wedding decided he could no longer associate with us because he was scared of the consequences. I mean, it was that case times 100. So many elements of our lives just started to collapse because people were
Mm,
so afraid to be associated with folks who were being singled out by the president. And so, Xander, when it came to our discussions today, and we'll talk more about that with our next guest, who was part of that ride with me,
right.
in a sense, but we felt like it was important to call this what you just said, Xander. This is the real anti-weaponization fund. Today, we're going to be launching the real anti-weaponization fund, right? Donald Trump tried to create a anti-weaponization fund to give cash to criminals that were his supporters that did things like storm the U.S. Capitol. That, thankfully, is on ice, at least for now. We want
Yeah.
there to be a fund to go support people who are targeted by Donald Trump's actual weaponization of the government. And here to talk with us about all of that today is Mark Zaid. He is a Washington, D.C. national security attorney who has been challenging the U.S. government for over 3 decades. And, by the way, he is a lawyer who has represented me. I would like to welcome Mark Zaid onto the program. Mark, welcome back to Defiance Daily, my friend.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's always great to be here.
I got to say, Mark, out of the gate, and I'm not just saying this because you've represented me, you're the best whistleblower attorney in the United States of America. I think there's no question about that. I mean, you are. You've represented people, and by the way, not just targets of Trump's revenge. You represent people from both political parties across administrations, and you have had as much of a front row seat as anyone to all of this because you yourself have been targeted. Donald Trump revoked your security clearance and you went and fought him in court. Before we ask you about some of the things that are happening with the broader Trump revenge campaign, I just want a sense of what your personal experience has been like in all of this, both Mark himself being targeted and the people that you've defended amidst Trump's campaign.
Yeah, I've been in D.C. for over 30 years now. I don't care about the politics. I've represented senior government officials in Democratic, Republican administrations. I go after whoever is in power. Doesn't make a difference who it is. It has only been the Trump administration, both first and second time, that makes it personal, as if, right, you're the enemy. I've just been the lawyer. I'm not the political lawyer, even though they think that I am. So in the first Trump administration, when I represented the intelligence community whistleblower whose complaint led to impeachment, not because of what we did, that was Congress. We just represented the person as a whistleblower to make sure that they were not retaliated against, to make sure their identity was protected, to make sure that they weren't subject to threats, etc. And to make sure the oversight authorities, again, happened to be Congress in that instance, were able to get the information. I received, just like you, death threats. I had 24/7 armed security living in my house. I had, what else? I mean, I got swatted. That was always fun when that happens. I haven't gotten a pizza delivered to my house yet. That actually might be.
We can order you a pizza, Mark. You deserve a pizza, at least for everything that you've done.
Yeah, I'll probably get one now since I've said that for people. But and now in this, and Trump called me a sleaze bag, I think it was, and I should be sued for treason, which doesn't exist as a matter of law. This administration has actually been interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the death threats the way I did the first time around. And I put that mostly on the death of Rush Limbaugh. I think it was a lot of time when he said something about me that I saw the uptick in death threats and harassment online. And obviously he's gone, so I don't see that as much now. But as you mentioned, Trump went after me and over 100 of us for having our security clearances revoked. And while the vast majority of those people didn't use their security clearances any longer, I did. I do, as part of my job in representing whistleblowers and regular federal employees and contractors that have nothing to do with politics whatsoever on a daily basis. I'm the only one who sued so far, and we will be filing a new lawsuit. And I thankfully prevailed and have had my clearance back since January with no issues whatsoever.
Wow. Mark, is yours? We were just highlighting a pretty incredible quote by a judge dressing down the administration. Is your sense that the Trump administration's strategy is to intimidate and hope people don't defend at all? Because when you actually go to fight back, there's not as much there as one would expect from an administration bringing lawsuits against individuals.
No, I think that is very much a strategy. I've been telling people a lot, especially now lately. It's been a year and a half. And Miles's case is a perfect example as well as mine. We are subject to an attack, and a very public attack. I mean, Miles was alone in his attack, that the executive order only targeted him. In mine, I was with a few other people. Let me think. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Liz Cheney,
good
Adam
company.
Kinzinger.
It's good company.
A few other
company
people,
to have.
Norm Eisen, right? But after that, nothing. Pretty much nothing. It doesn't mean there wasn't a significant impact. Miles rattled off death threats at the house, for him and his family. Not fun at all. But did anything else happen? I mean, their job law. I see this all the time. Well, victims of Trump attacks and Trump allied attacks. It causes loss of employment. I have a client who was one of the folks with the reflecting pool who got arrested for doing nothing, not vandalizing anything. He lost 2 jobs. I have other clients who were senior government officials who got targeted, got fired by the administration, and now they can't get employment in the contracting world because the contractors are intimidated and don't want to jeopardize their other contracts that have nothing to do with the individual. And I see that time and time again. And it's, it's a lousy, slimy strategy, but it is a good strategy in their view because it doesn't take a lot of effort. You hit someone hard and then you just let everyone else kind of act in your stead without a constant attack. Except for a few, there are a few, Comey, Lisa Cook, John Bolton. There are a few, John Brennan, very high profile people who have been the target of multiple attacks. Probably because those are the only ones who Trump remembers his names. I don't know if you guys saw. So Chris Krebs did some interviews a few days ago, and Chris and Miles were targeted at the same time. I don't know. It might have even been the same day.
Same day.
Right? Yeah. Of separate executive orders. Chris Krebs was the election official in the U.S. government who said 2020 was totally lawful, no interference. And he said he found out in Maggie Haberman's recent book that Trump didn't even remember what his name was. Trump just said, wasn't there some guy in the administration who said bad things about the 2020 election? And then somebody else piped up, Chris Krebs, I think. And he's like, oh, we should go after him. Wow. That was all it took.
That was all it took. And that, I think, Mark, is frankly what is so chilling about everything that's happening is we've never in American history had a president who so easily has been able to direct the investigative organs of government without any check. I mean, in Chris's case, in my case, he took one of these, he squiggled it on a piece of paper, opened a federal investigation, detonated people's lives. And of course, he's done that many times since then in different ways. He hasn't signed executive orders like that. And you and I could speculate why the administration has stopped doing that, probably because it's a very easy way to show that the president has engaged in selective and vindictive prosecution, but separate conversation. But he's continuing to use these other mechanisms. In this recent case, Frank Kendall, former Air Force Secretary of the Air Force, Trump administration, accuses Frank Kendall of putting information out there about the vulnerabilities to the Qatari gifted Air Force One that Donald Trump got. And I was saying, Mark, the other day, how ironic I felt like this is the person being called out is the person Donald Trump is alleging warned the public that there were vulnerabilities in Air Force One. Again, Frank hasn't said that he was the source of that information, but the person who actually created those vulnerabilities, Donald Trump, is not being held accountable. So put that irony aside as well. This is yet another example of how federal government is being weaponized under Donald Trump. In fact, Frank, much like Chris Krebs, said he found out his security clearance was being taken away basically on social media. Take a look at this clip.
So I just have to ask you, your reaction when you first see the post from the Pentagon that states that you, former Air Force Secretary, have lost your classified information, your classified status. It's been revoked effective immediately. What did you think, and did you find out from that post?
Well, Aaron, it certainly made my weekend more interesting. I found out about it. My wife and I were at a cooking class I'd given her for a couples cooking class I'd given her as a gift for her birthday. So our phones were off. And about 9:30 at night, we walked out. I turned them on, and there was this tweet that had come out of the Department of Defense. I was initially mystified because I couldn't think of anything I'd ever said that was classified. And I had tried very hard not to say anything classified and was quite sure I had not.
Mark, tell me what you make of all of this. The Kendall case, maybe you can speak to it, maybe you can't speak to it directly right now. But what does it say about what is still happening in this administration?
Sure. And I do represent Frank now. He says it later on in that interview as well. And that's how we found out. I mean, I found out because it was in the New York Post that my clearance was being revoked. And then it took like 6 weeks after that to actually do it because they couldn't figure out, I guess, how to properly do it. And what Frank said in the New York Times, he was quoted by name, was simply, it wasn't based on anything he knew from the administration. He's been out of access of this type of information since the Biden administration left office and Trump came in. He just said that, how if they only spent, X millions of dollars on a plane over the course of like a year and a half, that can't have as much security as when he was in power, in office, and they put billions of dollars and several years into an Air Force One aircraft. I mean, just apples and oranges. Now, understand what happened with that storyline, because before Frank's clearance got revoked, and we still haven't seen any documentation about it, there was the story that Trump was all upset about it, and the Department of Justice subpoenaed New York Times reporters to find out who the other sources were in the story, the actual sources for the story. They failed miserably. The judge rejected the subpoenas, chastised the government for not doing things properly, quite frankly. And so my sense is Frank Kendall was the consolation prize, sort of the low-hanging fruit to then at least show the MAGA base that, we're taking action against someone associated with this event, because they move on so quickly, as you guys know, that they don't need to have, and they rarely have had, major victories. What they do is they put, like, you think of a merry-go-round where you just want to, and before our time, but for those who know, they used to have where you would try and grab the circles as you were going around the merry-go-round. And that's basically what it is for them. So they try and get some victory so that they can do a small thing online. Look, we revoked this clearance. Look, we did this, we did that. Where the reality is, thankfully, the federal judiciary, at least that branch of government, has really held this administration's feet to the fire. I mean, if anything's been a shining star in the last year and a half, it's been the judiciary for enhancing or upholding the rule of law. Democrat and Republican appointed judges, including Trump appointed judges.
You hear that, Congress? We need one more shining star out there. Mark, one thing that's on my mind is oftentimes, to your point about them claiming victory, they're not emerging victorious. They're being defeated. And something beyond the defense of these individuals is important, which is it emboldens and empowers so many more people to be part of the resistance, part of the defiance. We've talked a little bit about, the kind of elite government employees that have been targeted, but we've also seen Trump go after everyday people and protesters that are just exercising their First Amendment. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the secondary effects of winning these lawsuits and allowing people to stand up? Because as Miles mentioned, in 2015, when he first got his executive order, you didn't have that sense of security and that sense of empowerment from the American people. I think a lot of people were kind of ducking for cover in that moment. These victories have really, I feel like, changed our trajectory as a country and as a resistance to this authoritarian threat.
The big problem, the thing that's so different now than what we have experienced previously, historically, is really, one, the internet, the vast ability to reach people, but even worse, or whether you want to say worse or better, but even more so than that, it's the focus and the divisiveness of the United States, so that people are only getting their media from a particular source. And you can look at this on both sides of the extremes, and there are extremes on both sides. If you're only hearing from the people channeling information to you, you get a skewed view, right? If you watch MS Now all day long versus watching Fox News all day long, or even worse, Newsmax or Mike Lindell TV, you would come away with a completely different perspective of what's going on in the country, which is why it's so important. I'm always flipping channels to go through and see how everybody is looking at these different issues. So a lot of the successes we have aren't being discussed elsewhere. I was watching the election returns for Minnesota, I guess it was, last week when they had their primaries. And I was flipping back and forth. I wanted to see, which candidate would win in the Democratic primaries. And Fox wasn't even covering it. They were covering Trump being in California and and it was just like a love fest for him.
Mhm.
But it was so telling in listening to it, because I have family who watch, that's all they do is watch Fox. And you can see where people get a particular skewed view. Again, I say it, both sides is responsible for that. And both of that contributes to having a problem. We're obviously focused on holding this administration accountable like we would in any other administration. When we all, and I put you guys in it too, get criticized for being anti-Trump, for, only challenging this. The reason why we are so much more vocal now, while before I didn't know who Miles was until the first administration, even though you were in government for X number of years, because you were just doing your job. It wasn't whether you were doing something political or not. You were doing your job in support of that administration until obviously you stepped away from it. But you look at it now, the reason why we are so vocal against this administration is because they crossed the line so much more than any other administration in the past. I could point to lots of Democratic administrations where I thought they did something wrong. I challenged what they were doing wrong. I got court orders that they were doing something wrong. And you know what? They changed and they stopped doing it. Versus this administration where there is no guardrail, right? You're bowling with the gutters. There's no, rails for the kids on the side. And they don't care if they throw gutter balls left and right because they go by numbers. We're going to throw 100 balls down the lane. And you know what? If 99 of them hit the gutter, we don't care because we'll get one strike and that strike will win us lots of money, which is what this administration seems to be about. And, the rest of it is we're doing what we can just to, keep things status quo most of the time, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I got to say, no one out there is fighting the fight as hard as you, my friend. Obviously, I'm personally grateful for everything you've done. The country is grateful for everything you continue to do. And I say this not to blow smoke up your ass, but what you are doing, Mark, is not just protecting your clients, you're protecting everyone's constitutional rights, because with this administration, you're having to fight for those constitutional rights a lot more frequently than we would want you to be having to do. So, Mark, thank you for joining us as always, my friend. Thank you for what you do. We're going to be in touch with you about the announcement that we're making in the program a little bit later.
I appreciate it. Guys, you're doing, I never say the Lord's work because then I'd be JD Vance, I suppose. I'm so not used to doing that. But my rabbi grandfather
we'll take just great.
would say,
great.
We'll take great.
Yeah, this is awesome, guys. And this makes so much of a difference because there are a number of us as lawyers who are so committed to doing this work. And the vast majority of what we do is pro bono, is for free. I personally do not feel it's acceptable to, I understand why people do. I'm not speaking for any other lawyers that's doing it something different, but I'm not comfortable taking money from federal employees who are targeted for political reasons for just doing their job. And the efforts of what you guys are doing in both speaking out and also any type of fundraising, it really makes a difference because then we can step up to help those who don't have the ability to do so on their own.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much, my friend. We're grateful for you, Mark.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mark.
Xander, earlier I spoke with another friend of the program, Don Lemon, who knows firsthand what it means to end up in Donald Trump's crosshairs. Of course, the Trump administration had Don arrested over his coverage of an anti-ICE protest. And this week, his attorneys moved to dismiss the charges against him. I asked Don what it's like having the weight of the federal government come down on him, having the president put him in the crosshairs, and what his experience says about Trump's campaign of presidential revenge. Take a listen.
I feel, look, it's not pleasant, as you could imagine, I'm sure, Miles, having the weight of the government, on you, right? Or having the government, the Department of Justice coming after you. That's not a pleasant experience. And then also knowing that you did nothing wrong and knowing that I feel, in my opinion, in perfectly within my First Amendment rights to be able to cover a news event where a news event is going on. And so I think that, that part is frustrating, but then just frustrating to more than anything, the frustrating part for me is obviously the freedom of the press, just ignoring that, but the amount of taxpayer dollars that they are spending that could be better used. But they keep bringing on other cases, and imagine the things that are just being ignored because they are focusing on political revenge from the president of the United States. So that doesn't feel, that's not a good feeling. But there is something that is, makes me feel good, is that standing up for what's right, standing up for democracy, being in this space of independent journalism, where I don't believe that we have bent the knee or have capitulated, in a way that the press shouldn't. That we should be standing up and fighting the powers that be, because that's what we are supposed to do. That's what the press is supposed to do.
I got to tell you, my friend, I haven't had the chance to say this to you, but I was so floored when your team and your friends did what they did after you were arrested. Our buddy Joy Reid basically spun up a live stream, and she and folks in your orbit went live for I don't even know, was it 24, 48 hours? And they would not be silenced about what had happened to you. And it really actually felt to me, my friend, like a seminal moment since this all began, because a year ago, folks would have been afraid. They would have cowered. They would have said, I don't necessarily want to associate with someone that the White House has blacklisted. This was the inverse of that. People were rallying to your defense. I wanted to know what you made of that after the fact, and if you also felt like something shifted here. People are not afraid anymore.
That's a very good question, because I often think about it, and it makes me emotional because a couple things. One, because when I started this, right, most of the people who I hired to help me with this channel did not have much live experience and news experience at all, at least live in the streaming sense. And some of them had worked maybe for a cable organization, and that's a whole different thing, right? Because you have just resource after resource after resource. Nobody believed in the live thing, right? They're like, we don't do video, it's just audio, blah, blah. Okay, so that part makes me proud that we had assembled, that I was able to assemble a team, and that team was smart enough and nimble enough to be able to evolve and learn in such a short amount of time that we actually had the channel, that they could do something like that. And then I thought about, if it was not for independent media and for streaming now, where streaming is, that I wouldn't have a voice. Anyone who's in a position like mine would not have a voice. They would simply have silenced me. But not in the thing that we're in now. But then to have my colleagues, former colleagues, current colleagues, people who have nothing to do with Don Lemon, who I just met maybe on a live stream, like Sam Cedar or Mehdi Hassan, or, just, I don't want to leave anybody out, but just come to my defense, and really come to the defense of the First Amendment and freedom of the press. I think that it just spoke volumes. So, I feel that we are at the forefront of something that is very powerful with the press and with the First Amendment, and that we are in a position now, all of those folks who came on, a lot of the folks couldn't come on who are still in legacy media. As a matter of fact, I don't think they came on because they have to protect that and they have to preserve that. But the people who came on in independent media said, yeah, hell no, we're not letting this happen. This is wrong. I was so emotional that, I could barely do the live stream that day. But honestly, it made me proud of what we're doing here. My team especially, who put it together. But it just made me very proud of what we all are collectively doing in this space.
Well, look, I don't want to blow too much smoke, but I think it made people proud to be Americans to watch that happen as it happened. Is folks were rallying in real time to the defense of an American citizen who had obviously been persecuted by his government. And now I feel like, Don, we are seeing other news organizations, other folks that are the targets of the president's ire, bring a little bit more alacrity into the fight, like you did, like your team did. I mean, I think that even just the New York Times the other week, not taking these subpoenas and treating them in sort of traditional, silent, legalese fashion, they fought this in the court of public opinion before it ever reached an actual court, and they won. They got DOJ to back down. I wonder what your global assessment is on those efforts to defy Trump's revenge campaign. Do you see the trend lines going in the right direction? And where are there still gaps? Where are there places where Donald Trump still has the advantage and we're not doing enough to stand up against abuses of federal power?
I think that courage is contagious is basically, I think, that what you were saying, and that where people were afraid to go up against the presidential administration or the Department of Justice or whomever in this time, I think having, someone who is an independent media who doesn't have a big organization behind him and a big infrastructure or structure behind him, to see that you can stand up, I think that courage is contagious. And I actually do think that we encourage some journalists, maybe many journalists, to say, what the fuck, this is wrong. Pardon my French. So what do I think of the global assessment? I think it's incremental. I think that we see some folks coming around, but as long as we have this consolidation of media, especially this consolidation of conservative media, it's not, it's going to take a lot more than a couple of journalists standing up to be able to make a difference. It's going to have to be like when people do no kings, right? We're going to have to do a no fascism, a no dictator movement for a dictatorship, no authoritarian, no fascism movement for journalists. Because if the government and the people who hold power in this country start dictating to journalists what they can report, where they can report it, how they report it, or I'm going to silence you, once we allow that to happen, this whole thing is over. It's the First Amendment of the Constitution. It is the bedrock of the Constitution. And I believe without the First Amendment, all else fails. Publishing, books, movies, everything. Then we no longer have a free press.
Don, tell me, when you think about the role of the journalist amidst all of this, has it changed? I mean, you and I have talked a little bit before about our friend Katie Fang, who, when Katie was at MS Now, I doubt she would have been able to go out there and file lawsuits against the Trump administration that she was covering. But we're in a moment where there isn't a traditional separation between journalist and story, because the administration is making the journalists the story by going after them, not just denying them the truth, putting them in jail. How do you think about that distinction in this moment? How should other journalists be thinking about that distinction, as some of them might consider jumping out of mainstream media into independent media?
I wish that I had done it 5 years before, I got booted. I wish had I known, I don't know if I would have even redone my contract. I redid my contract just before they moved me to that morning show. I redid my contract. And had I known then, which was 3 years before or so, I would have, actually it was like a year or so that I took off a year, but I would have, or maybe even before my other contract, which was, I think, like 4 years or so, I would have said no. Because then I would have had much more momentum in this space. I would have much more subscribers, much more members, and I would have had a much clearer, defined, distinct voice, and it wouldn't be CNN's Don Lemon. Now, when people talk about me, unless people are writing, in the back, and they want to, unless they have an agenda like some conservative thing, they want to say former or ex-CNN anchor or whatever, they want to put some sort of, adjective on it, a descriptor on it. But otherwise, right now people are just like, hey, it's Don Lemon. It's Don Lemon. And so I would have done it sooner. So I think that our folks need to think about that. And I asked a very similar question to Maggie Haberman when she came on to talk about her book. I said, Maggie, what do you think of what some of the folks in these independent spaces are doing? Look at what Katie Fang is doing. Katie Fang would never have been allowed to do that at MSNBC. And she did bring up a point. She said, well, the New York Times has filed something on behalf of whatever. But that's not individual journalists standing up for themselves. She's right about that, but that's not, and it's easier in that sense because you have someone like a New York Times, but it's not often enough. And the journalist has to do whatever the company says. If the company says we're not going to pursue this, we're going to pay it, and then we're just going to let it go. You have no say in that. And so, but now you have a say in, I'm going to hire an attorney. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to go to do, what Defiance is doing, what Miles, I'm going to go and see what they have to do. And you get to decide, you get to stand up. And there are people who are out there who want to help. There are agencies and attorneys and advocacy groups who want to make sure that we keep our First Amendment and we keep our freedom of the press. There's not enough people, in my opinion, doing it in corporate media because of the structure of corporate media and because of the word that I just said as a descriptor. It's corporate, which really means that the news organizations are a profit center for the ownership group or the company or the stockholders or the shareholders. And as long as you have that, those gatekeepers, it's not going to be the same. But someone has to stand up for it. Otherwise, you just become a stenographer or you become a false equivalence advocator. And, one of those things like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Okay, we'll let you decide. And then you go to the break. And then maybe every once in a while you get a question in that people think is like, oh, they own that. But it doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. So that's how I feel about it. We need to do things that mean something that's going to protect our democracy and our freedom as journalists and as American citizens.
Well, Don, final question. I know I've got to let you go, which is we've got reporting today about Donald Trump's prosecutor in Washington, D.C., former Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, that she is going to be standing up a special grand jury in Washington, D.C. that allows it to exist on a standing basis. A lot of people are speculating she's going to use this grand jury to bring charges against the president's revenge targets, to slander more of his enemies. My question for you is, for anyone who winds up in the president's crosshairs, be it another independent journalist, be it someone who's running for higher office, an ordinary American who's protesting ICE, given what you've been through, my friend, what is your advice for anyone who ends up in those crosshairs? What would you tell them today?
I would say to make sure you are in touch with someone like Defiance.org. Make sure that you hire a good attorney, and make sure that even in the face of fear, whatever it is, however you're feeling, that you have to push through it, and that they're on the other side of it. It's not easy. But on the other side of it, you'll feel a lot better about yourself, and it will work itself out. It will work out. And so I truly believe that. I have to have hope in the next election in 26 and 2028 that we'll get people, a calmer and smarter people, and more fair-minded people, liberal in the lowercase liberal sense of the word, not in the sort of political ideology sense, who understand what this country is supposed to be about. But anyone who finds themselves, don't be afraid. I know that's easy to say. Keep your wits about you and realize that there are people out there who can help, and there are people who can offer you some guidance. And also the most important thing, which you mentioned in this interview or in this conversation, is that you're not alone. And what happened to me on that day, and every day since, but especially on that day when it happened to me and I went to court, is that you are not alone. There's a community behind you, and people care, and they will support you.
Well, Xander, we go now to someone who's been central in that community that Don Lemon was talking about, that community that tells them they are not alone. Our final guest tonight is Abbe Lowell. He is an attorney in Washington, D.C., practicing at his firm Lowell & Associates. He is often referred to as one of the most successful white-collar defense and trial attorneys in the United States of America. He is also, by the way, someone who has helped defend me against Donald Trump's revenge campaign, as well as Hunter Biden and New York Attorney General Letitia James and Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook and our friend Don Lemon. and California
Wow.
Governor Gavin Newsom, and the list goes on and on, and you're about to find out why. Abby Lowell, welcome to Defiance Daily, sir.
Hey, hi Xander. Hi Miles. Good to be here. It's so kind of weird to be in the waiting room and seeing you and seeing Don. It could have been like my fam, you know. It's like
and to boot, before you came on, Abby, we had Mark Zaid here as well.
oh my
So
gosh.
it's just
Okay. So wait, is this the unfortunate, Lowell gallery of robes? Is that what it is? And now you have me to add to it. Okay, well I'm glad to be
Abby,
here.
you brought this on yourself by running into burning buildings every time they get lit on fire. And I want to open, my friend, by asking you about that, because I asked this question both to Don and to Mark. We're talking this Wednesday about countering Trump's revenge campaign, and you have been in some of the most high-profile cases so far of this second administration, defending people against those abuses of power, against Donald Trump's abrogation of the U.S. Constitution. Give us your status update. How is this fight going right now? How do you see it from the legal trenches?
I think a couple of things, you two, and everybody who's listening. If you remember guys like Steve Bannon or Steve Miller back in the first month or two of 2015 talking about their strategy, remember the phrase flood the zone?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we in the bar of part of this pushback, call it the pro-democracy movement, call it whatever you want, we're flooding the zone too. There are probably like 400 or 500 lawsuits that have been filed. There's probably 200 injunctions and temporary restraining orders that have slowed them down or stopped them dead right. So I would say that how is it going is that while there were a number of people, companies, media organizations, and law firms, unfortunately, who decided to leave the playing field, there were a lot of others who basically did not, and some, like me and the people I work with in my firm, who decided to enter the playing field. So I do think that, how's it going? I mean, it's a little bit, guys, like playing the arcade game Whack-A-Mole, right? Today he does the Kennedy Center, and tomorrow we file a motion to stop it, and then tomorrow he does the golf course, and we do that, and the next day he arrests Don Lemon, or he issues an executive order against you, Miles. So a little bit, it's like a game of Whack-A-Mole. But do remember that even in the arcade Whack-A-Mole, you are hitting moles. You are pushing them back down into the ground. So I would say that it's a mixed bag, but I don't think we're doing terribly. And I also think we, the lawyers, the people in your groups that help the lawyers and the clients that get targeted, are basically playing one of the fundamental rules. I mean, look, Congress isn't working. The courts are divided at the level of appeals. We're relying on trial judges and district court judges to grant us our TROs, to grant us our preliminary injunctions. Yes, they get challenged, but we're doing okay-ish on some of those. And so I guess that's a long-winded answer. So if I were to give us a scorecard right now, I would say, and because I'm a baseball fan and we're in baseball season still, we're in like the fifth or sixth inning, and the score is that they may be a run or two ahead, but we're at bat. We're at bat.
That's so great to hear. Abby, one thing we're trying to add to the equation here this week is crowdsourcing support for these individuals. And we heard Don Lemon just say the difference it made knowing how many people were in his corner, and even became new subscribers to him, right? Not just in his corner for the fight, but were interested in the work he was doing and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about the impact you've seen of the public rallying around some of your really notable clients?
Indeed. So look, there's so many pieces to making this work. So if we still have some big law firms out there, and we do, I can't count them on all of my fingers and toes, who have their normal big paying clients that pay them XTX dollars an hour, then they have a reserve, and some of them have stayed tuned and will do what used to be called pro bono work. Will represent you or cause or somebody for no extra funds. Okay. And then there are entities like ours and others that have lawyers involved, whether they're the Democracy Defenders Fund or the Democracy Forward Fund or the Democracy Protection Network, and I can go on, and there are a handful of others. And those entities rely on the support of entities like yours, like Defiance.org, like others. You do a bunch of things. One of the things is to help provide the financial means for some of those lawyers to proceed. That is intricately important because, look, if you're not a big firm and you're not therefore taking my extra hours in a week and devoting it to free legal work, because my paying legal work supports that. And many firms are afraid. So I get that. But if you're like us or others like Democracy Forward or any, they rely on some amount of funds because nobody can do this completely for free. Nobody's trying. This pro-democracy movement isn't padding our 401ks, right? We're doing what we need to do to get from Monday to Friday, to keep the lights on, to pay for the laptop, our webcam, our papers, et cetera. So how important is it, Xander? It is as important as the lawyers themselves, that the community is rallying around, and not just with their financial support, but with their moral support, with their willingness to show up at rallies and write to their members, show up at a congressional hearing and yell and scream about it. That is excessively important, because all of this adds to the ability to go forward. Think about it in whatever analogy you want. If this is a war, and I hate to think of it that way, but it's not something that people haven't done, you need the soldier on the field. You need the person who provided them with the ammunition to fight on the field. You need the people that provided them with the rations that let them stay on the field, et cetera. And without any one of these, it falls apart. So if that explains it to you, that's how each one of these is equally important. And I mean that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Abby, it's fitting for you to talk about the need for that crowdsourced support, because as you know, there's something special we're going to announce tonight. I want to cut to a quick clip from a Defiance.org member to make that announcement and talk with you about it on the other side.
Hi, I'm Betty, a proud Defiant. On behalf of all Defiants, I'm proud to announce Defiance.org is creating an anti-weaponization fund to counter Trump's blatant misuse of government resources to go after his political opponents, to defend them against a DOJ gone rogue, and to protect the rights of all Americans against selective and vindictive prosecution.
Let's go, Betty.
Hey, Betty.
Yep.
I like it. I'm Betty. I am a Defiant. Or like all the, what is Don calls his people?
They're the lemon
heads.
heads. Ours are the Defy Ants, Abby. Defy Ants, because as we like to say, the ant, depending on the species, can carry between 10 and 100 times its own weight. It is the Defy Ants that are going to save this country.
I love that. I love that. Okay.
But we're excited to announce this. We're also excited to call it the Anti-Weaponization Fund, because we think Donald Trump expropriated that term for the wrong reasons. We're going to do this for the right reasons and go support some of these cases like yours and others to defend people who might not be able to defend themselves, who might not have the means to defend themselves, who might not be a super high profile figure that can afford to pay full freight at a major law firm. And we want to be another resource out there to help folks do exactly that. So while you and I are talking, folks can go check this out at awfund.org. awfund.org, and they can see how they can support these efforts. Defiance.org is going to be putting resources immediately into this fund to support people. But Abby, talk to me a little bit about how that environment itself has changed. I know that when you were thinking about jumping out of big law and coming down to Washington, D.C. from New York and fighting on the front lines to protect these people, that you yourself were taking a professional risk. Have you seen the ecosystem grow and expand, including in the speed with which it's protecting people that Donald Trump is targeting?
Yeah, so to put a fine point on that, a couple of things. First, just to be clear, I've lived in Washington. My firm had offices in New York and Washington, and so I was here, but I did leave them. And look, Miles, let's talk about yourself. You had no choice in some ways to become targeted for what you did, but you could have done a lot of different things. And I know firsthand that there were entities and organizations that would have wanted you. And instead, you too did something. You helped create this organization. You're spreading the word. You're getting support. You're supporting people. How important is it? I guess it has grown. It has grown. There was this pro-democracy movement before January 21st of 2025, and it had amazing, important work to do. It fought red state attorneys general interfering with women's ability to get the doctor of their choice to get the treatment they need. There were excesses in other government institutions in Democratic and Republican administrations. Fine. But since January 21st, this has grown incrementally and to the point where, is there enough support, both morally, spiritually, financially, to fight back against Trump and all he's doing? No, not yet. But is it growing? Yes. You just now have proven the point by announcing your new ability to do that. So my observation is a lot of people have decided that whatever course they were on, they are going to change that course to meet the moment. And that's why this firm, Lowell and Associates, was set up. One of our phrases when people ask is, we decided to meet the moment. And when people ask me, Miles and Xander, particularly like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this at this stage of your career? The answer is pretty easy, for me anyway. I say, for sure, this was not my plan 2 years ago. I had a different plan, but Trump wasn't my plan 2 years ago either. And so that's what it means to meet the moment. And lots of people are meeting the moment.
This is another great example of the type of infrastructure I think we need. I've been doing little bits of history every day, and so much of what you learn when you cover the rise of other authoritarians is they can't actually repress everyone. They need people to concede before they're actually repressed, or at least not rise up together. And I think whether it's the coalition of district attorneys we put together, or this effort right here that is going to defeat Trump using the courts over and over and over again, it just shows Americans there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. You can defeat these guys. They don't have the powers they claim they do. Oftentimes authoritarians rely on people believing they have the imaginary powers they claim they have. And your work is so important. Your victories are so important, even beyond those individual cases. And Abby, I just want to thank you for all the work you've been doing. Like you mentioned, we all didn't plan on doing this, but we're stepping up into this moment. And Miles mentioned some of his friends telling him when he got his first threats not to poke the bear. I don't think our founding fathers would have said that. That's a claim they would have said, hey guys, lay low, don't poke the bear. No, I think we are all doing our best to step up in ways that would make our founding fathers proud and answer the bell here. So thank you for your work, Abby.
And right back to you both and everybody else that talks with you and was working with you. I mean, look, it is ironic. You named the fund, the Real Anti-Weaponization Fund. Donald Trump could not basically claim as own the celebration of the Declaration of Independence 250 years ago. 250 years ago, the founders put into place things that represent what you're doing. Remember what they did. They fought back against a monarch, about an oppressive authoritarian government. They said, and remember the phrase, we all have to hang together or we will hang separately. That is what this country was founded on 250 years ago. And what you and others are doing, and I'd like to think of me and my colleagues playing a small role, we are being part of that movement that you could trace back to Philadelphia in 250 years ago.
Abby, in closing, if there's one thing you could urge the thousands of people watching live right now to do, and the hundreds of thousands who will see this after we post, what would that be? What would you urge ordinary Americans to do to help stand up in this fight and counter the Trump revenge machine?
Guys, this is not that hard for me to say because people have asked me that before. And so this is what I say to answer your question. Everybody who doesn't like the way America has been running for this last year and a half can do something. And everybody can do something different. We don't expect everybody. Not everybody that's watching you or listening to you or will are lawyers. So they're not going to be the ones to go into court. Not everyone is a podcaster or a journalist. But I assure you, everybody can do something. And here's an example. For those of people who have never gone outside to protest something, go outside and protest. For those who have never written a member of Congress or called on the phone to their incoming phone call, go and do that. For those who have never given or have given $10 or $20 or $25 to a candidate running for office that's committed to changing the course of what's going on, give 30, give 40, give 45. For those who never understood that there are organizations like you to support, take that extra $10 and send it to them. Somebody, we can all do something. We can't all do the same things, but I guarantee you that if everybody did something, we could change this. I started my work as a young teen fighting against the war in Vietnam. And what we did, young people, if you think about it, was got together, took to the streets, told people what was going on, and we changed the course of American history. People can make a difference, and people can do it if they remember. Never say, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I'm not Miles and I'm not Don Lemon and I'm not Abby. I'm telling you, everybody can do something, and in the amalgam, it will make a difference.
100%.
Abby Lowell, from your lips to all Americans' ears, I want to thank you, like Xander did, for everything you do, my friend. And we are grateful that you are defending people in this fight. It has been an inspiration. And we are very, very pleased to be able to support clients like yours and Mark's and people like Don, people like the protesters in Minnesota, folks who are getting picked up and charged for simply exercising their First Amendment rights. We're going to keep doing that until all of this is over. And then, Abby, you and I can sit down and talk about what we had originally intended to do with these 4 years.
I agree. We'll keep it up, you guys, and all of those that are listening to these two guys. They are just such an important part of this program and of this pushback. Thank you for having me, and we will no doubt be talking soon.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Abby.
Xander, I do have to say one thing. It occurred to me as we were sitting there with Abby that Defiance.org members should be so proud of what they have done. We didn't plan our guests this way at all. We just literally thought about who are people who've been targets, who are people in the fight. But Mark Zaid, who was on earlier, works with and is one of the top lawyers for Whistleblower Aid, the organization defending whistleblowers around this country, whistleblowers who have come forward and exposed Donald Trump's violations of the Constitution. We supported that organization. Don Lemon, you all out there, I believe, were the first dollars in to make sure that Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, independent journalist who got arrested in Minnesota, had the legal counsel they needed right away, and that they had support after they had been arrested by the Trump administration. And we launched an independent reporters fund to make sure anyone else who got swept up in that would have assistance if they needed it. Any other journalists that were picked up. And then, of course, Abby, who we just had, is defending a number of these high-profile targets. And as we're about to discuss, this anti-weaponization fund we are launching is going to protect people, innocent people who in most cases cannot afford to go defend themselves against the revenge of Trump's Justice Department. So you've touched a lot of lives already, Defiance.org members, and you're about to touch a lot more lives. So Xander, walk us through the Anti-Weaponization Fund and our weekly actions for Defiance.org members and anyone who is watching.
100%. And, as we were talking about this today, I was thinking, what's the difference between when we take on a weekly mission versus when we build a new piece of infrastructure? And I think, Miles, it's about when a certain strategy needs something novel in the space, and it needs to show up more than once every 2 months. We can only rotate through so many topics so frequently, but things like district attorneys, trying to convict ICE agents of their crimes, that needs to be its own thing. It needs to have its own cadence. It needs to live beyond what Defiance can highlight and do. I think this is another example. This is another example where we know Trump has weaponized the courts. And we know, I think as Mark Zaid said, the courts have shown up. As long as you use them, the courts have shown up and not only ruled in favor of the folks that are targeted by Trump, but chastised the Trump administration for trying to weaponize them. And so we just felt like this was yet another important piece of infrastructure in this fight. And we wanted to allow an easy way for people to step up into that. So for your actions, as always, gang, by the way, go ahead.
Go for it. No, go for it.
No, as always, gang, you can go to defiance.org/actions to see what we're doing this week. But all the actions this week actually are living at awfund.org. A member, by the way, called it anti-weaponization, ANTY weaponization, which I thought was really good.
Like Defy Ants. I love that. Yeah. Insidery. I love that.
That one. That's really nice. But yeah, you'll see. So the 3 letters. One, we heard. I think it was Mark Zaid that said. Oh no, it was our last guest there that said Abby that said that the moral support was also really critical. And so what we've done with awfund.org, if you go see it, antiweaponizationfund.org, is you can not only donate to the cause, which you see as your third action there, and make sure that there is a war chest waiting for these individuals to defend them when needed. And as Miles mentioned, we talked about some superstars, right? The Don Lemons and Letitia James and whatnot. There's a lot of just normal people that are exercising their First Amendment that have been swept up and targeted by the Trump administration. That's mainly who we're talking about here. That's who we want to get behind, is the folks that probably don't know Mark Zaid's phone number or Abby Lowe's phone number, don't know there's these firms in this infrastructure waiting for them out there, have gotten targeted, and we're going to show up for them. So you can donate, but also, number one, the first action here, you can write letters to them. And we've made that really easy. If you go to, Mercedes, if you could go to awfund.org, and I just want to show them, when you scroll down on the page on awfund.org, you'll see we've set up an easy way to show support for Letitia James, to show support for Lisa Cook, to show support for Georgia Fort, who are in different stages of their fight against the Trump administration. Their victories, as I tried to point out a couple times on this program now, their victories are beyond their own. It's important that they win because they have high-profile cases, and lets everyone else know this Trump administration is not who they say they are. They don't have the powers they say they do. And so giving these people inspiration to keep going, to keep fighting is really critical. We've made that easy. Go on there, write your letters of support. And then lastly, you won't be surprised by this one. We do it every week. Share this campaign. Share this. Make sure other people see us. This is the launch of the Anti-Weaponization Fund. We're hoping this plays another important role, like GTFO ICE, like FAFO. We're putting this out into the world to make sure that those targeted by Trump know the public has their back. They'll get letters of support. They'll get funding to fight their cases. So put that out there. And then, of course, as always, you got your badge. If you scroll down a little bit here, Mercedes, I helped launch the Real Anti-Weaponization Fund is your badge. If you're feeling spicy, post on social media and tag our dear President Donald Trump and let him know we're not dealing with this shit. We're coming together to fight back, and we're going to win this war. As Abby says.
I love that. Be sure to do that. If you're looking for where that graphic is, we're going to post it across our social channels. If you want it right now, because you are willing to go poke the bear. Like Xander said, you can find it at defiance.org/actions. You can go grab that badge and post it on social media. But let me tell you a little bit about this fund, folks, and why we're doing this. First of all, defiance.org is seeding this fund. So first and foremost, a thank you to Defiance. We are putting thousands of dollars into this fund to support initial targets. Now, there's actually a very high-profile case that's happening right now where a target of Donald Trump's revenge, a whole bunch of their friends and family and associates, innocent people are being sucked in, and people cannot even afford the lawyers to respond. We're going to take immediate action to go support people using this fund who need lawyers to defend themselves against one of these revenge investigations. But we want to go beyond that. The purpose of this fund is to allow us as an organization, whenever one of these cases pops up, to do this first, to pick up the phone and to reach out. We call them, we call their lawyers, we find a third party who can get us in touch with. Maybe it's a group of protesters who've been picked up for protesting outside the White House against Donald Trump, against their rights. Maybe it is a politician who's been targeted, who's now out of office, who's still the focus of Trump's ire. We reach out and we say, do you need help? Do you need legal support? Do you need coverage for security costs? We determine whether there is a need there, and either connect that person to the right resources or directly use this fund to go help cover some of those legal costs, to help cover some of those security costs, to make sure that we can act rapidly. And I'll tell you why we're doing that. From, again, firsthand experience, my immediate reaction after this happened to me from Trump was not, I'm going to rush to the microphones and go fight this. It may look at home like when people go fight this, well, that's easy. They're going to stand up. They're going to fight Donald Trump. Believe me when I say, the first voices you hear are people who are saying, don't put yourself at greater risk. Don't punch back. Don't say anything. Please lay low. That is not the attitude that will help us defeat fascism in this country. That is not the attitude that will make courage contagious. And we want to be, as an organization, one of those voices in their ear right away saying, no, it is okay to fight back. There is a safety net, because there are real fears there. When people get hit by something like this, when the president opens an investigation against them, even if it's a lawless investigation, their very first thought is, am I going to be bankrupt? Is my life going to be destroyed? Can I seriously afford to fight back against this guy? We've got to change the calculus. We have to change the calculus. So even if they're the best man in their wedding says, don't do it, because they might come after me too, there's defiance.org, Defiance members, millions of Americans saying, you can go defend your rights. You should go defend your rights. And we are going to have your back when you do it. That is why we are doing this, folks. It is very important. I'm so proud that we're able to seed this fund and immediately help folks. Hopefully starting this week, our team is trying to schedule those phone calls with those legal teams of folks who are in one of these high profile campaigns. But then, as Xander noted, we also want to make it easier for folks who've already chipped in to help make this possible. We want you to provide moral support to these folks, like Xander said. That list of people is an initial list on the site that we're going to send messages to. We are going to have a rotating list of people who've been the targets of presidential revenge on that website. If we can bring it back up, awfund.org. We're going to put folks on there and allow you to send them messages of support. That may sound silly. A lot of times when you see things like that, it's like a tacky thing and the message doesn't go to the person. I wouldn't do something like this if we're not going to get the messages to the people. We're getting your messages directly to these people. And some of you have heard me talk about it before. Honestly, as silly as this sounds, one of the most impactful things that happened to me and my wife after all of this went down last year and Trump targeting us was that we got letters. We got postcards. We got hundreds of postcards from people around the country, handwritten in cursive, telling us they had our backs. That was life-changing. Those literally sit on my desk at home. And I want to make sure, and Xander's heard me talking about this for a year, I want to make sure there's a way that other folks who get in the crosshairs have that experience, because it can feel very lonely. Many of them don't hear from people, or they maybe hear from a handful of people. We're going to change that. We're going to change that. And so three of the folks that we decided just before this show to put on there are people we admire for having decided to fight back. Georgia Fort in Minnesota, who we mentioned, who had been arrested for covering those protests. Georgia this week did the defiant thing, and her legal team, also like Don Lemon's, has pushed to have her case dismissed. You see Lisa Cook right there on the Federal Reserve Board, who again, this week, Donald Trump again started to go after in his quest to take over the Federal Reserve. She is fighting back. And New York Attorney General Letitia James. We're in touch with all of these people directly or their teams. Send them a message of support. Thank them for taking on this fight. Bolster them to stay in this fight. We're going to put more people on there on a rolling basis so you can send them messages. People who aren't big household names, people who are protesters who went out there and exercised their constitutional rights and are being pursued by this administration. We want to make sure that those messages of solidarity get to those people, in addition to the means to help them defend themselves against the lawlessness. So I just wanted to say that this one means a lot to me. We've been thinking about for a while about bringing this to life. And if you do want to chip in, this is separate from any contributions you would make to defiance.org to fund our other fights. So if you contribute at awfund.org, every single one of those dollars will go into that funding line to go support those people. So if that's a cause you care about more than any other, if you've never supported one of our missions and you just want to support targets of presidential revenge, you can do that. And this is going to play out week to week, month to month, as we see these attacks continue. Trump revoking security clearances, Trump firing federal employees who want to go file a legal action against it. We're going to be reaching out. And as often as possible, we're going to announce those folks that we are defending or the organizations that we're helping to support to go defend those people. So anyway, Xander, I'm very excited about this one. It was life-changing for me to have people crowdsource support so that we could have an incredible legal team. I want us to be able to do that for others.
100%. And I imagine again, we're kind of kicking Trump's ass. As we continue to kick his ass, he's going to flail more and more. And one of the primary ways he flails is trying to use the legal system and prosecutions to intimidate people. And so the need for this type of infrastructure is going to increase as his lanes for legitimate victory close even more and more. We've seen that over the course of this year. We're going to continue to see that. And so this piece of infrastructure hopefully can play a really meaningful part in making sure that among his many other strategies we're thwarting, that strategy is also thwarted. And we get this win together. And I want to say one other thing that Abby mentioned. So Abby was saying something like, hey, not everyone's a podcaster. Not everyone's Abby Lowell. Not everyone's Miles Taylor. I want to say, I've been studying authoritarianism for a year and a half on a daily basis now. The most important thing is that everyone's pushing back. Actually, authoritarians are really good at targeting and intimidating elites and influencers and people that can move hundreds of thousands of people by themselves. What they absolutely cannot do is squash a million groups of 12 that are standing up in unison together. It is the only intervention on authoritarianism. And so that's why when we build these platforms, we build it with crowdsourcing and crowd participation in mind. It is the only defense. Trump can come after me. Trump is coming after Miles. That may happen more, that type of attack. But if you all are organized across this country, that is actually how we win, how we become ungovernable. And I just want to thank you all so much for allowing us to build platform after platform and tool after tool so we can all be as effective as possible in this fight. Miles, anything to say before we get out? Are you doing your actions? I can tell you're doing your actions. I was literally a standing applause, and Miles is just wide-eyed.
The reason I couldn't unmute is literally I was donating to our anti-weaponization fund, and I was having to press the button for Apple Pay, so I couldn't. I had to use that button as well to go unmute. The actions, every Wednesday now we're going to do co-working. We're going to take the actions when you do. This is a very easy one. This is a fast one this week. You can just go to awfund.org, chip in if you want to chip in to that specific fund. Defiance.org members have already done that. If you want to go above and beyond, please do. Those recurring monthly donations to the fund really help us build this into a war chest we can use to support these folks. But look, put all of that aside, just go send a message of encouragement. I just did that to Letitia James. I'm going to send messages to the others. I think we're going to try to get that first batch to all of those folks next week. I'm telling you, none of the three of them have had anything like that happen yet. Or if they have, it's been smaller than what they're about to get, right? We're about to send hundreds, hopefully thousands of messages of encouragement to them. I want us to be able to do that every time we add new names on there and support for folks. So go check out awfund.org, send those messages of support. Before we end today, Xander, we have another exciting announcement to make, which is that we have brought 2 additional part-time team members into the defiance.org community to help us grow the defiance in this country. We are so thrilled to welcome them onto the team. So please join me in giving a virtual round of applause to Drew and Melissa. Do we have Drew and Melissa in the house? Hey, all friends.
Right. Hey, everyone.
So Melissa is going to be, you've already seen messages from Melissa. She is our new associate editor at Defiance News. She is every single morning bringing you the latest of not only Donald Trump's abuses of power, but the actions to fight back against it. And Drew McDowell is going to be heading up operations internally at Defiance, making sure that all the support that we muster to go take on this cause goes to where it needs to go, and that we're actually in real time delivering on our promises to take this fight to Donald Trump and his allies. Melissa, I'll go to you first, and then I want to go to Drew. Introduce yourself, and I'd love to know why you were excited to be a Defiant.
Oh, I'm super excited. Well, first of all, I'm excited to be working with you, Miles, and Drew, and Xander a little bit too, again, because we've worked together.
Just a little bit excited to work with Xander. You can't get too excited to work with Xander.
I worked a little bit with Xander before, not as much as Drew. Sorry, Xander, that's not how I meant it. But anyway, no, I'm just like super excited to be
He
here.
takes the abuse. He takes the abuse. He loves the abuse.
I'm really sorry, Xander. No, I'm just super excited because I just love the energy here, and I'm excited to be working with Mercedes too. So I want to add that, and yeah, no, I'm just like I'm so psyched to do a lot of community fun activities with all the Defiants, and love it. Very excited.
Well, Melissa, we are thrilled you're here. Drew, what about you, my friend? You and I
I'm
have
a
been
little
in
thrilled.
the
I'm a little thrilled she's here, Miles.
Xander's a little thrilled about our new teammates. Drew and I have also been in the trenches before in this fight, and we were excited that you, brother, were willing to come back into it. But tell us why you're excited to be a Defiant, my friend.
Well, Miles, I've been a Defiant for many months now, and I was on the sidelines, kind of doom scrolling, minding my own business, and then you and I keep in touch quite a bit. But you reached out saying that the Defiance is growing, and we need more team members on board. So I was more than happy to take that call and to join the team. And like you said, I've been with Melissa in the fight for many, many years and on different projects, and I've gotten to know Xander the past few years as well. So I'm thrilled to be on the team.
Xander, is there any
gang,
ritualistic
there's
hazing
some
that needs to
chatter.
happen here? Oh, go ahead.
There's some chatter in the comments about wanting to see Mercedes' face also, because she's lived in the darkness this entire time. We're meeting Drew and Melissa before we're meeting Mercedes as a group.
Y'all are about to find out that Mercedes is secretly just Xander. He's got one hand on the keyboard messaging me, and another on another keyboard. He's pretending to be Mercedes, the producer. Mercedes O'Brien is such a rock star. She is like a team of 100 in one. But I think Mercedes is also very thrilled that we won't all be killing ourselves quite as hard, because if we die, we can't do this work. And so Melissa and Drew are helping to make it easier for us all to keep the momentum going at defiance.org. So we're thrilled to have you guys. A question for both of you before we jump and wrap the program today. Melissa, you first, and then Drew, which is, where do you think we're winning right now in this fight? Where do you have the most optimism right now based on what you've seen? And you both have been in the pro-democracy trenches for a long time. So I'm curious what your answer is.
Well, obviously the courts have been amazing. Thank God we've had so many good judgments. But I actually posted the other day, and it went sort of semi-viral, that I'm noticing, like, where I live, I'm not seeing, and I live in a fairly MAGA leaning area, I'm not seeing Trump signs, Trump flags.
100%.
I think people are just feeling like people are getting it, you know? And so I feel like that's important, you know? I feel like just the idea that, like, oh yeah, you know what, maybe this isn't what I wanted it to be or thought it was. And I think that matters, you know? So I think that, like, groups like us, like, we're not only doing the big things like what our guests were doing today, but we're having that sort of, like, you know, like sort of a lower level impact too, just on the culture. And I think that's where we're winning.
Yeah, I would say pretty similar. So I'm in a purple area, Wake County, North Carolina. And so if any Defiants are around this area, you probably see quite a bit over our overpasses. We have huge groups of protesters every single day at the busiest intersections throughout Raleigh. But you don't see that from the other end. So I think this Defiant community is growing, both, you know, within our organization and more broadly. That's been the most encouraging. Then hearing guys like Abby and Mark earlier, they really kind of get me energized to stay in this fight.
It's so interesting hearing you both say that. I think Mark said that he wasn't receiving death threats like he did in the first administration. And I was going to mention something similar, that it does feel like, in also my area, and I live in a semi-rural area as well, that the MAGA hats and the MAGA flags have been put away. And, you know, maybe these are people that still will vote his direction or in support of him in some way. But that, like, extreme allegiance, the cult piece of it, does feel like it's dying down a bit in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, it does. Well, I still will say, though, if we're measuring success by there were fewer threats to end our lives, we still have a ways to go.
Certainly.
We still have a ways to go, but it's a great metric. And
Lower the bar a little bit.
it's a great metric. But please, Defiance.org members, Defiants out there all around the world, please hit the heart button. Give a round of applause. Welcome Melissa and Drew to the team. We are thrilled to have them. And we are also thrilled that you have enabled us to grow the Defiance in this country. So thank you, Melissa and Drew, and my co-founder, Xander. Thank you, everyone out there today. This has been another Weekly Mission Brief. Please share with friends and family the real anti-weaponization fund, not the stupid $1.776 billion thing Donald Trump tried to do to give cash to criminals, the fund that you're going to support to help defend the people who are targets of his revenge. So go share on social media, awfund.org. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, as always, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together.